and I'll be able to talk about some of the ways that we can become more familiar with a subject. Now, when we're painting a subject, obviously there's things that we're looking from right to left, top and bottom, and somehow we've got to find just what we're inspired by, and that becomes the idea. And we have to now format that idea into some type of a format. Either it be a square or rectangle or vertical or 1:2 proportion. In this case, this is pretty much a proportion that would be pretty much equal to, like, say, 11 by 14, 9 by 12, something like that. But what you see here is a couple different sketches. The first two look relatively very, very similar in how they're approached. And the third one is much more in a linear fashion. It's kind of separating some of the major elements that the top has, but it's not separated as much. You see a little bit of a foreground here, which now is shown delineated here, and where that water, there's a water line back here, and you see it in this one too. And of course here I had it too much in the middle. Here it's a little bit more sky than land, and here too it's probably a little bit more sky and horizon, if you will, out to the horizon, than it is where the land or the water ends and so forth. So becoming more familiar. I had to turn that image around. Let me rotate that image 180. Whoops, there we go. So by doing just some light little sketches, even if it's in line, I'm having to look at my subject that I'm making a linear depiction of it, and I'm looking at the outside shapes and how I'm simplifying these shapes according to the shape to the left or to the right of it, where there's openings inside, more openings where there's less. I might be kind of doing a little bit more of a simplified approach and only putting the major shapes in first that I'm seeing as far as openings. But whatever I do as far as observing and then drawing it out, either sketching it in a value sketch like the first two, or doing it in a linear sketch, I'm becoming more familiar with all the various elements which have different shapes than one another. They're in different positions, there's different maybe angles, they start different, they end different, they overlap. One is behind another, one's in front. Then I start to think of what's good for composition, of course, and that's talking about balance and all that. But that gets into the design part, which I'm not necessarily talking here. But design, when we're formatting, we always need to consider a good design and good balance and so forth. So, but doing a drawing first of your subject, even if it's a light drawing like this, or line drawing like this, that will help you become more familiar with the elements that you are about to paint. I see many a time, too many artists just grabbing the brush and starting to paint. And I'm talking about artists that may not be well seasoned yet. And I don't want to, I'm not here to look down upon anybody, but the more work that you put in, the more canvases that you painted, acres of canvas. They always talk about it. Once you paint an acre of canvas, come back and talk to me. That's kind of a quote that lets a beginner know that you need to really put in some time so you really know what you're dealing with, and then I can kind of guide you a little bit more, and as far as a good learning process. So, sketching is definitely a good way to begin to learn familiarize yourself with the subject at hand. Here again, you have a sketch. I've got numerous sketchbooks, And I've got also some that I do these notans. Notans are more of a value sketch. Here I've got a similar subject. I don't have the photograph in front of me right now, but that's not important. I have the similar subject, and what I was doing, I was exploring different compositions with it, and in doing that, I started to become more familiar with the simple elements in this case. This scene had a very simple foreground. It was a foreground, kind of a middle distance, and there's two distances here. There's one little island that's closer, one little island that's further back, and then you have sky. So you actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. John Fabian Carlson talks in general about 4 distances in a landscape: foreground, middle distance, distance, and sky. Again, that's a generalization that was said just to get the student to understand that there are separations, and we need to look for what makes the foreground separate from the middle distance, what makes the middle distance separate from distance, and what makes the distance itself separate, or all the first 3 separate from the last one being the sky. There's something there in value, and these value, these what I refer to as notans, can help you see that very quickly. And actually, I went over this front one twice with the same marker, so this got a little darker. So you actually have the water in front. This one, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have 6. If you want to think about the subtlety, and this one actually reveals that a little bit better, where you have these trees, and you can see what I did. I started to explore something. This one needs balance. This one is unbalanced. I did these, I believe, for one of the students a number of years ago, and it's probably in one of the earlier monthly deliverables you'll find it, and I'm not sure, it might have been on design, might have been on developing the foundation of a painting. You'll find it in numerous maybe topics, but what I was talking about is taking a simple subject that they had and how you might be able to recompose and edit and make something a little bit different. So what I didn't show here is some of these become obviously unbalanced very quickly. This one probably, this one here and this one here become unbalanced very quickly. When you start to bring that dark slightly over, 3/4 of the way over, it doesn't seem to be unbalanced at all. So this one doesn't, but this one here now has a little bit something different happening too, where I've separated these front ones more with actually a definite shape and some space between this and this and this. So I'm familiarizing myself with a little bit more of the subtleties that might have been in the original photograph that I could expound on and actually help and create something more interesting. To make, let's say that to make this one work better, I'm just going to grab a color. To make this one work better would have been maybe to put a, let me see if I can just, I'm waiting for my computer to catch up, to put another value, let's say over here. You can see how immediately another shape over here, that helps to balance that. See, without that, it doesn't have balance. If I would put this here, that helps to balance, but what did I do? I put that dark shape in the middle of this space. So that's not really, it helped to balance, but it's not a good design. Whoops, I had to do the same thing here. Let me turn that one around. Sorry about that. Let's see, counterclockwise, there we go. So now, let's say if I would put it here, where it's not in the center, I still have a balance issue. It's leaving this whole space on this side open. So again, the very first one that I did, where I have something either here, not going off, either here, that helps to balance it, or I can have something going off completely, and maybe something like that happening. I had it, let's have it going back a little bit further. What I'll do is I'll find a gray that's maybe not as dark, and I'll have it like it's on closer to the edge of this area here, so that's slightly behind this here. That helps to balance that. That would be the same as what I would maybe do, with this one here. You either can run it off, and this one might need something over here. Even could be a rock in the water, or something. But that a notan will help you familiarize yourself with close value relationship. In this case, there was a very close, let me get the right color again here. There was a very close value relationship between this part of the forest and this part. But so the value was close. What you can't see right now, and what I would have talked about, is there's probably a color temperature difference between this and this. This having a little bit more richer color, being closer to you, this being slightly cooler, but the values might be very similar. What separates them is the shape, smaller shapes, and then sometimes a color shift, or a temperature shift. This was all pine trees. Apologize here, get that rotated again. Counterclockwise, there we go. These are all pine trees, a pine forest with a lake in front. And so shape will help bring something ahead. So I'm familiarizing myself with the values that are there. I'm starting to adjust and change shapes and separate shapes out. This tree was separated out from that one there, which doesn't show in these too much. And then I separated one out here. So I'm changing the composition, the makeup, the spatial arrangement slightly to create a much better composition. Here I do a number of these different little sketches. Sometimes they're not fully complete. Here was one on some hollyhocks that I was sketching and looking at how the ones that were further in the back and they were in shadow, how they appeared according to the ones in front. And this one I did as a challenge. This particular image is in one of the photo libraries, and I did it as a challenge to get the students to paint and simplify the landscape. And I did this one with gouache. These are all gouache, by the way. And but all these were done sometimes prior to doing a larger painting, and they help me understand, or even when I'm beginning to edit, even in the very early stages, they help me understand where I'm going in my editing if I'm choosing to edit, or what I need to look for subtleties of something going further back, making sure I get the drawing right, the perspective. All those principles and foundations of good art are checked first by doing sketches, quick little watercolor, or in this case gouache sketches, that help me familiarize myself with the subject a little bit more at hand. I got small little travel notebooks, if you will, that are with watercolor paper. This again is a scene from Spain. And what I loved about this, we walked up out of town and walked up on this ridge a little bit, and you could look down upon the rooftops. And I liked the rooftops. And of course, there was one cathedral here that stood out with the bell tower and some of the other architectural changes of that particular cathedral, along with some of the trees that were in the landscape in the city. And you have some of the background in the sky and so forth. There was a close-up of a ridge here that was interesting. And then I ended up putting, there was a few birds flying around. I ended up putting some birds. I thought, well, if I did this as a large one, it'd be kind of neat to have some birds like maybe coming out of the bell tower, flying to it. That was just an added thing. But all this is to familiarize yourself before you would do a larger painting of it. This was a spring scene where a lot of lush yellow-green, lemony green trees and a little bit of earth was showing, and some grasses were coming up, and there was a lot of green to it. So and there was a neat house that was back here, And so this was an early sketch of the scene to get a little bit of a familiarized feel with it. There are certain things that I look back that I got these bands going from larger, a little bit smaller, smaller yet, and then I have them separated by a brown band. Not a good design element. Sometimes I catch myself, I can still come up with a bad design very quickly or do things that I will be correcting any one of you occasionally. I have to correct myself. It is just sometimes those inherent things that come out in the very beginning, and I catch myself going, oh gosh, why did I clone that? Or why did I clone it in marginal shapes getting smaller, 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 like a father, mother, child kind of a thing when you put trees. Here's a tree, and then here's another tree. I see that happening so much. That you'll get sometimes in an orchard where you have trees going to the distance and they're all about the same size trees. If this was an orchard in front here, you might have an apple tree here growing and you have another apple tree slightly behind it, and they're getting smaller as they go further back into the scene. That we've all seen, but nature, as this particular scene was more of nature, not man-grown trees, they are more asymmetrical versus symmetrical. The symmetrical element came into the house having certain amount of windows. The windows are very similar, and maybe the roof line was similar. There are some similar upright shapes, so geometric shapes versus all the organic shapes, which should be definitely different from one another. And I did it again. I should have saved these all. Sorry about that. Let me get this back here. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Just a little bit of a closer view of it. So you can tell that I'm not working for detail. And when I talk about occasionally, I talk about developing the foundation of the scene. When I do gouache paintings, that's pretty much what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for detail and all the little nuances. I'm looking for the big shape and relationships of light and shadow, dark and light as far as maybe a different type of tree, different tree in front here, then the trees in back. Here we got a pine tree here. I think these might have been some taller pines. And so that's what I'm looking for when I do these quick gouache studies. They allow you to work very quickly with water. I don't have to carry a lot of different brushes. I can work with only a few brushes. This pad is probably only maybe a 6x9, I think maybe the size of this pad is. It's a smaller pad. I got a various different sizes, and you can get, and this is some real nice watercolor paper. It's a stiffer, maybe I'm going to say it might be 150 pound, like Fabriano or Arches. It has a nice surface to it, nice tooth. Would take watercolor, or in this case gouache, very nicely. And very good to take along and familiarize yourself with a subject. Here's one subject that I had some mums a couple of years ago, and I clipped them off and I put them into a vase and had them on the island. And I looked at them for a while and I took the shot, and that was kind of interesting. And then I was scrolling through certain things to do some quick studies or demonstrations. I did a quick study of this in gouache. And this is just very quickly, but I kind of simplified that whole background and went to a violet. I kind of started to see like some violet in this black. Not as violet as I got with this, but I went to the violets because of the yellow. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe it's too violet. So, anyways, at the very end, I did a full-fledged painting. This is a large 48 by 48, and it became a different painting than this. But I became very familiarized with all the flowers, and so this was a larger painting, which I had a lot of fun painting looser edges and some of the positive, negative shapes that I developed. Looking through some of the greenery. And but there is still a commonality to this, to that. That's how that ended up. But there was a spark in the beginning. I just had to familiarize myself a little bit with how some of the flowers moved through themselves very quickly. The only thing that separated was a subtle shape change, and then there was, for the most part, there was no light on this. There was a little bit of ambient light from above, but there was no sunlight or direct light. It was just a little bit of light. There's a window to the left here that was getting, and then there was windows to the back. You can see how it gave a shadow and a reflection here, more light behind here. And so when I went for the large one, I went for that backlighting, more the backlighting, a bright light around it, surrounding everything. So this is an interesting scene from, I judged a plein air event down in Louisiana. And I had a few days prior to the judging. I went out and did some of my own searching and looking around, and I came across this neat little boat, probably a shrimp boat or some kind of boat for netting. They catch all kinds of things down in the Gulf, so I'm not sure if this was for shrimp or not. This was on a Sunday afternoon. Nobody was around, so. And here's a little sketch that I did with gouache, and I made it much warmer than what it was. You can see here's the original color of the paper. I have just a light watercolor, almost watercolor wash for that background that I put down first. And then I dry brushed the trees in, but I made it much warmer. It appeared much warmer to me than this particular shot. But I just like this road kind of leading up the grass on either side, and it made for, and then a light, of course, that was on the boat. Most of the boat was in shadow, and made for kind of a fun painting. I might do a larger oil painting of that particular scene someday. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll put some figures in here. Some figures, maybe a guy working on something back here, and another guy standing here pulling something up, and maybe a guy over here standing and handing some stuff to that guy. Look at, I'm just drawing this stuff real quickly without even looks like somebody in a dress there. Maybe it's a woman standing there. And anyways, I just sometimes sketch loosely and get an idea what I might do and add something to it, just to help tell the story a little bit instead of this abandoned boat just sitting there. Maybe need something. So, anyways, this all, again, what I did here will help me eventually when I do a larger painting. I will remember that, I needed to soften some of these edges with the grasses, and how did they appear here? Well, maybe they didn't quite appear that exact way, but I wanted to soften that transition before I got to the hard edge and the weight of that, whoops, I went to the wrong one. The weight of that boat, and the darkness of that boat. This again is all a very symmetrical and geometric shapes, and this is all more organic. Then you get to some more geometric shapes, and in the background, it was fun to put that in. You can see I put that in first before I put this in. I left some of these areas white and negative so I could paint around it. I drew this whole thing first. And that's another thing too, that when you're doing gouache, if you need the white of the canvas, you have to plan it out so that you have the white there, so you can put your colors down properly, just like a watercolor. And by drawing it, you start to learn about the shapes, understand the overlapping, where this happens, where that happens, and then you put the color down, and the color going from back. I put this in first, put this in over top the background, and then I started to develop the other shapes that I had left negative and open, develop those as far as foreground and where the boat was in relationship to the background. And doing all that, as I'm talking, but when you're actually doing it, you become more familiar with everything that's in that scene. And hence, so when it comes down to doing a final painting of that, even if it's a year or two later, it's amazing how you will remember some of those things that you took the time to address, the somewhat translucency of that net. And you can see a little bit of that background through it. That's something that you pick up here and there when you're painting outside and or observing outside, and and then you can apply it to your work. So let's go to another one here. This is another scene from a local scene. This is a park that I visit often, and it has this wonderful stream. And this was, I'm trying to think, it might have been late spring. I know some trees weren't fully leafed out. There were these trees in front and right here were just getting some leaves on them. I'm not sure what kind of trees they were, but I like this stream leading back. And everything was in shadow in the foreground here for the most part, but there was just some light starting to hit, and especially in this open area back here where the sun was consistent. As I looked around various scenes to the right, to the left, and then back of me, and then back at this one was not changing. And I knew from where the light was, this would not change much, that this would stay consistent for quite some time. If anything, the sun was going to get a little higher. The sun was over here coming up, and if anything, the light was going to start to come in. You can see some light on that part of that grass right there, I think. But if anything, the light was going to spill in here more and over here. So I quickly got this developed. And you can see I'm kind of painting almost, let me make this bigger. I'm painting almost in a block-in style of just puzzle shapes. You can almost see where some of these have endings, but I'm already addressing edges and softening edges as I was developing this. And let's go to, here's the scene that I was enthralled with, that light behind, these trees in front. And let's see, I think here's kind of the finished study. A little bit warmer colors than what were there. And so that there were darker warms, but what happened is I wanted to have the cools here and a little bit of the cool in the sky to be contrasted by the warms, and then of course the sunlight that was hitting more back there, and just a little bit of sunlight right in that part of the stream. It helps to bring in move your eye through and start to bring it this way. Of course, the light here, this is its reflection light of sunlight. It's not actually sunlight, it's reflection of sunlight. So it helps to bring your eye through from the top. It helps you bring your eye, move your eye back through, and then get it back to the outside and come back around again. And my focal point, probably the lightest light and the darkest dark was probably almost right in here, but I haven't done a finished larger paint. This is just a small study. I might make it more in this area here. Might make these trees a little bit darker, a little bit bigger, and might move this light area over here so it's not so much right in the middle. Might recompose this a little bit at the very end. But these are some ways that you can become more familiarized with the subject that you are about to paint, sketching it, even in a light line sketch or a value sketch, learning how to make that building look like it's or a tree look like it's growing out of the land instead of just plunked down on top of it. Looking at the edges of the grasses. Maybe it's a very manicured scene, but yet there's something that makes the building look like it's anchored and not just placed as a puzzle shape on top of it. Or if it's an older building and grass is growing around it, that's a little bit easier. That allows you to put things in front and make it look like it's part and growing up. So all these things that I'm suggesting help you to become more familiar with your subject.
My name is Kenn Backhaus, and welcome to this online art instructional course. I've been involved in the arts professionally my entire life. I am a signature member of the Plein Air Painters of America, master signature member of both the Oil Painters of America and the American Impressionist Society. My works have appeared in many of the national art magazines. I've been included in several books, to name a few: The Art of the National Parks, Sea to Shining Sea, and The Enchanted Isle, Plein Air Painting on Catalina Island. I was one of the hosts for 2 art-related public television series: Plein Air Painting the American Landscape in the Art Instructional Series, Passport and Palette. I've been teaching art workshops for over 20 years. Prompted by many students' requests, I created this particular Study to Studio course. This course is developed for either the indoor or outdoor painter. The translation from a reference study to a larger studio painting has always been a challenging process. In this 4-week course, I define the tools of my trade, my palette, and an important color mixing demonstration. I will take you through the same exact process which has proven to be successful for me in the studio, including various creative options that will improve the results of your studio efforts. My process of teaching is wrapped around the sound and historic foundations and principles that are the guidelines that defines quality art. I feel confident and believe that you will discover this course to be very beneficial to your future artistic development. Tucson Art Academy's online courses is the new way for art educational opportunities. I hope to see and work with you in this new online course.